I lied. The big hand is on the 9.2 already. Sorry about that. One of the ways that I like to sell information architecture is to tell people that it will only add time and trouble to the start of anything. So let's do that. And I'm not good at selling it, consequently. The reason that I want to share this with you, this way of seeing from Marshall McLuhan, to talk about medium and message a little bit, is because information architects have to talk about what things are. What are the things? And that sounds like an idiotic question. And software developers and engineering dominated context, that is the very last thing anybody wants to talk about, is what things are. It only adds time and trouble to the front of a process. But my experience in doing this for 20 or more years is that when it's done good, it ends up saving time and trouble at the more expensive part of the process, which is when the software is being made. So for a lot of folks, this is theoretical mental masturbation. And wow, how does this help us ship more and better? This won't help you ship more and better, but I think it's really important. So that Playboy article that I had you all read, or made available for you to read, it's fun for many reasons, including being able to say that you read it for the articles. That interview was very important. Many people that I've read in trying to understand McLuhan have observed that it's unfortunate that there isn't a book, that there isn't one book that you could look at that is readable, where you could get this guy's ideas. And this interview, there's something about the format of interview that got him talking in ways that were clearer and less about a language game than almost any of his writings. When he's writing words for publication, he's really interested in the work of James Joyce. If any of you have tried to read Finnegan's Wake or Ulysses. So reading McLuhan in his own words is terribly difficult. And somehow this Playboy interview, this mass media focused opportunity for somebody to ask him questions about his work and for him to talk about it, he ended up saying some really powerful things in ways that people could understand. And I love this question. Either this guy is a total nut job, it seemed, especially at the time, either this guy's crazy or so important that we can't appreciate this guy's importance. Back in the 70s, I don't recall what year it was precisely, Marshall McLuhan was simultaneously on the covers of Time and Newsweek, which back then, that was about as mass culture as you could get. And there was a for real interest in Marshall McLuhan in popular culture. And it never really got resolved because he's an exceedingly hard person to pin down. But many of us have at least had this naive sense of, oh man, what if this is for real? This would, back to IA as something that's interested in epistemology. How do we know what knowledge is? How do we know what things are? McLuhan could be very important to that. He undermines our ability to use him the way that we use dead guys who said smart stuff. He said that he doesn't necessarily agree with everything he says. And so the reader is left in a peculiar position of either you need to somehow read his whole oeuvre of work, and God help you, I can't do that. Or you need help interpreting this guy. You need to try to apply it, especially. So McLuhan made things difficult for us. Who has heard this turn of phrase, the medium is the message? Has anybody heard that? Some of us have. That teaching is what I'd like to focus on today, because there's a lot going on there. And the place that you could get it, if you wanted to get it out of McLuhan, you could start with understanding media. But these little review notes that I added here, infuriating, brilliant, and incoherent. Or, if you like, I think this is aspirational for me. I'd love to get here. Obituary, if it started with oracular, gnomic, and mind-bending, I think that's a pretty high attainment, actually. But this is not easy to understand. And there was an attempt. There's this really cute little book, you can get it for not very much money, called The Medium is the Massage, which is a collaboration between Marshall McLuhan and a visual designer to try to help, I guess, make this more accessible to people, although what this does is makes it as hard to figure out. It just uses more pictures. So this is wacky stuff, and I'm not sure I understand it, full stop. But I've used it and it's helped me a lot. And so what this will land on is a tool that he created. I'm going to demonstrate this tool, and then perhaps you could start using that in this really obtuse seeming question of what are things? What are things? How do we understand a thing? So that's where I hope to arrive. I'm going to toggle between some videos and this presentation. I don't have rights for some of these videos, so these won't be in the slide deck. If you want these, I can get them to you, but we're in sort of a little gray area legally, I think. And so I'm going to play this first piece of the voice that you will hear in this video is Marshall McLuhan.
Instead of going out and buying package for which certain $5,000, you will go to the dog, describe your interests, your needs, your problems, and say, I'm working on this big difficult thing. I know that it's big. I'm qualified in general, and I have a good application. It'll be right over. And they want Xerox with the help of computers and libraries where all the latest material just for you personally. Not as something that you put on workshop. They send you the package as a direct person service. This is where we're headed under electronic information division. Products increasingly are becoming services.
This little floaty thing obscured the date there, which was 1966. So nobody knew what the hell he was talking about back then. But that sounds awfully like the world that we live in today, doesn't it? Products becoming services, mass personalization. So Marshall McLuhan, as somebody who could see where we live now from way back then, having stuff to say. And one of the things that he had to say was about media. And what do media want is one way of asking McLuhan's question. And that was fairly revolutionary at the time. Marshall McLuhan went around calling himself a media ecologist, which nobody had that coinage prior to McLuhan designating himself that. And this is why. This is why he thinks it's important for us to be able to understand media basically things, the things that people make, the extensions of man. So this overhead projector is media, this book is media, this water bottle is media, this pen is media, anything that people make. He believed that there's a difference between the medium and what the medium wants and the content of the medium. And what he accused us all of is having a relationship with media where we are worked over by it and we can't even feel or detect the ways that media completely work us over. And the reason for that, he says, is because the content is so distracting to us that we only focus on the content of a medium without understanding the effects of the medium itself, independent of the content that is delivered through that medium. He likens it to the cartoon of when you are a robber and you want to steal something and there's a guard dog. Maybe you can see the cartoon in your mind's eye. I can see the cartoon, which is the cartoonishly huge steak that is waved in front of the guard dog, and guard dog eats the steak, and I go in and I steal the thing that I want to steal. His belief is that all media work this way, and we are so blown away by, worked over by the content, so focused on the content. Fake news. Is that a content problem? Yes. But McLuhan would say, while you're worried about the content of that fake news, the format, the medium of news is doing some stuff to you that you don't understand. And telling people that they don't understand, that they can't probably understand, doesn't make you very popular. But that's what he was saying. I think it is interesting as people who are working in UX. If information architecture is structural in nature, I think it is. If we were to say that information architectures are more about media, that maybe that's one of the reasons why we've seen the rise over time of content strategy as a job for people like us to do, as a thing that is important in the development of digital products and services. There's a lot of people at Facebook whose job is called content strategist. And those people are paid a little less than the people whose job is called design. And so having some way of getting rigorous with content, formats, media, what are these things? I think it's relevant, especially in a field like information architecture, where the content thing has been given its own name and has sort of been spun off as a different discipline, even. Marshall McLuhan said that the importance of content compared with the importance of the medium itself is the difference between the importance of the stenciling on the case of a nuclear bomb and a nuclear bomb, which is an awfully large rhetorical gesture to make, but let that one sink in, that if you are working on content, that the effect that you have as somebody who's working in terms of content is sized relative to the effect that the media that content exists as part of an ecosystem with. That's his sense of the relative difference in impact to people, which is profound. And he explains this. He says that we're numb to this. He famously said, I don't know who invented water, but it sure wasn't a fish. That we are, victim is maybe too far of a word. I don't think he ever used that word. But that our relationship to media is that of numbness and idiocy. He described the response that we have to media as narcissus narcosis. And he used the mythological story of Narcissus, which I think is Greek, right? Was there a Roman equivalent of Narcissus? I think it's Greek. So the story of Narcissus being an analogy for what media do to us. Narcissus was so, does anybody want to tell the story of Narcissus? Does anybody know it? Go ahead.
Narcissus was, I forget he was a man or a god who basically became in love with his reflection to the point that he couldn't see anything else. He just kept staring at his reflection because he loved it so much.
Who did that to him? Yeah.
Minerva, I think. Or the priestess of Echo, the girl there.
Yeah, so Narcissus was the most beautiful man ever, let's say. And the nymphs wanted to frolic with him, as one might be wont to do. And Narcissus wasn't interested in that. Didn't reciprocate the interest in frolicking. And so they appealed maybe to Minerva. I don't know. I'm bad about the story, but it's like, this guy sucks. We like, and he's like, and so Narcissus is cursed to be in love with his own image. And this analogy for what happens to us in the presence of media, we are Narcissus. What we are intoxicated by, what we are cursed to be obsessively noticing, is the content of the medium, which is our image. But the medium is water. And because Narcissus was so focused on the content in the medium of water, which has the property of being able to reflect back image, that he wasted away. And I don't know, some versions of the myth, he dies along the side of the stream because he just needs to spend time with this image of himself. Other versions of the story, he falls into the water and the water kills him because we can't breathe in water as people. But this is McLuhan's framing of why it is that none of us know about this, is we are stuck in the narcotic fog of what content does to us. We're being distracted by the meat being waved at us all the time, and we don't understand what's going on with the medium itself. He insisted that the way that media work, and this is all media, any extension of ourselves, McLuhan would say, is a medium. That all of these media work as an environment. And that you can't understand, if you want to make social change, if you want to affect culture, if you want to do anything significant, basically, that you can't do that in terms of content alone. That you need to acquire this knowledge that he acquired, which is of the ways that media work interdependently and sometimes independently of content. And one example of that might be the failure, you all are probably too young to remember this, but back when there was a president who was good, there was this idea that people needed healthcare and there would be a system that everybody could use. And it was focused on a website. And then that website failed. And then everybody thought that the ideas were bad, right? Like, threw the whole healthcare reform thing under the bus of, well, it didn't, the rollout was shit, right? And the thinking about that as a total environment, and what does the medium of website, what is the medium of insurance, this getting down to the fundamentals of what is this that we're doing, I think McLuhan could explain the botched rollout of healthcare.gov as focusing all on the meat and not at all on the situation with the burglar and with the value exchange that's going on there. This is a little screenshot from my copy of The Medium is the Massage. Environments are invisible. Their ground rules, pervasive structure, and overall patterns elude easy perception. So yeah, so we suck. We are being worked over by content while media have their way with us. And our stance relative to all this is that of numbed idiots. So that feels pretty good. That makes it hard to care about, I think, for some people. Why would you care about this? Some of us get to make choices about the medium that any work that's being done is realized in. Should it be a high fidelity prototype or a medium fidelity prototype? Should it be wireframes in OmniGraffle? Should it be hand-drawn sketches of interfaces on giant pieces of butcher paper? Should it be a content inventory in a spreadsheet? Should it be a body storming session where we pretend to be parts of the system together? Many of us are going to have choices about what is the medium that value exchange is happening in, which is great. But I think for you all, it might be more important to know about this because as juniors, although some of you are senior in lots of different fields, if you are a junior, if you're in a position where you don't get to have the say, and if it's true, if there's even a little bit of truth to this idea that the content is working interdependently of the medium, and the medium is doing stuff to us, to the client, to the end user, because we don't have agency sometimes, maybe that's a good reason to take this seriously, is that we're not making those choices. We are having to deal with the effects of a medium that somebody else is choosing for what we do. One really simple example of this is Agile. Has anybody here been told that's not Agile? Like if you wanted to make a diagram or create some documentation or do any planning, there are prejudices built into how things get made that have media choices embedded in them. And if you have to be able to bring value in an agile culture where you're only going to be able to use a whiteboard, then asking the question, what is a whiteboard? And what does the whiteboard want? Independently of anything that I put on it. I think this is awfully interesting and valuable. Another way to talk about this would be to say that there are inherencies in these media that are part of it, and we're either choosing to ignore that these inherencies exist, or we're trying to work in a way where we don't have to be affected by knowledge of them or whatever they're doing. And depending on your point of view of just how much is inherent in things, understanding what is inherent in media, I think, is helpful. I have another video to help illustrate this, if I can operate the computer.
If you think of Brick, for instance, you say to Brick, what do you want, Brick? And Brick says to you, I like an arch. And if you say to Brick, look, arches are expensive, and I can use a concrete lintel over you. What do you think of that? Brick says, I like an arch. And it's important, you see, that you honor the material which you use. You don't bandy it around as though you said, well, we have a lot of material around. We can do it one way, you can do it another. It's not true. You can only do it if you honor the brick and glorify the brick instead of just shortchanging it.
Isn't it awesome that you used to be able to smoke in class? Sorry. I think it would be awesome. This is the great American architect Lou Kahn. Richard Saul Werman, who you will meet next week, was Lou Kahn's beloved protege. And this idea that Lou Kahn has, that what the architect, part of being an architect is having a conversation with the material that you are building with. He was saying that if you're building with brick, what you need to do as an architect is ask brick what it wants. And in this case, what did brick said it wanted? An arch. And the architect then says, well, arches are expensive. I could just put a concrete lintel over you. What do you think about that, brick? And brick says, I like an arch. And the idea here, I think, is the same one that I was trying to elaborate earlier, which is the idea of inherency. That there's something in the material that we seek to construct with that has properties, that wants things, and we don't spend enough time being thoughtful about that. What is the risk? Why are we talking about this? What if there are effects of the media that we're using to do our work that we don't know about, that we could have synergized with what we are trying to do, but we walked away from that opportunity because we were focused on what it said on the whiteboard, not about what is the nature of whiteboard relative to what I'm trying to accomplish. Yes?
Do you think the person who created the whiteboard with brick learns or understands the nature, default, quality or characteristic of that medium?
So the question was, if somebody is the progenitor of a medium, the first whiteboard, somebody was trying to, it's like sticky notes, right? Somebody's trying to make a pad of paper and the glue failed. New medium, sticky note. I don't think that the people who are responsible for the innovations that create new media have a necessarily better opportunity to understand what it wants than any of the rest of us, is my own hot take on your question.
But in that case, who get to decide or to say in determining, hey, this is the nature of this medium, we should respect that?
This is where it may become uncomfortable, because this is where we get into the, what if there are things that are objectively true in the world? What if it's objectively true that brick wants to be built as an arch more than it wants to be built other ways? That there's inherency. So McLuhan's answer would be, the effects of these media are operating without regard to how we intend them to work. There's the famous saying attributed to Churchill, like many things, so who knows if it's right. First we shape our buildings, then they shape us. I think that's the funny relationship we have with being innovators and creating new media, is we're just making stuff. And we don't understand this. And maybe by analogy, maybe this will help richen the question. My friend Shane Hipps, that's a little bit of Shane there. He helped me understand this better than anybody. He does this in a talk. He will present this sentence: "The boy is sad." And then ask the audience, how is that working on you? Which boy? How sad? Kerning, is that Helvetica? There's a lot of inherencies to movable type, to the technology of print. And then he shows this. I don't think whoever came up with abstract doodles, meaning words and stuff, had a sense of the difference of the modality, of the inherencies of how language works. We were just trying to communicate. We were just trying to get along. And the argument that McLuhan makes really well, that Shane Hipps illustrates so well here, is the difference between the medium of words and the difference between the medium of images is different. They want different things. They have different effects. And I have the choice as a consultant. I can choose sometimes to deliver something as all words. And I have the choice, often poorly chosen on my part, to put too many pictures in something, let's say, because people like pictures. More pictures is good, maybe, is how you think about this in terms of content. And what Shane is saying, interpreting from McLuhan, is that these media have inherent properties that we would benefit from understanding. And some of them work in really different ways. And the choice between saying it like this and saying it like this, hugely consequential. So being smart about what media are and what they want. I'm looking at the clock and maybe we won't get out of here by 4. I'll keep going. Here's a fun example of image culture contrasted, played against words as a medium. This is a bookstore where books are wrapped in paper with short descriptions, so no one will judge a book by its cover. How does, setting aside for the fact, I have a friend who works at Amazon, when they were testing a different, more beautiful layout for selling wine several years ago, he said that they would have to build a new hydroelectric plant to create the electricity necessary to generate all the higher resolution imagery just for wine at Amazon scale. But setting that aside, choices about, I could see somebody, a bookseller, making choices about how much and when to show book covers, how prevalent in the user experience is description relative to depiction, and that your business opportunity could change fundamentally. Maybe if these are shitty looking books with ugly covers, right, maybe this sells better. That adventure of unwrapping it, I liked the description, the bookstore isn't gonna lie, and if I don't like it, I'll return it, and they don't like returns. Who knows if this choice about medium and content results in a better business opportunity, but I think it's interesting to pose the question. So there's a tool that McLuhan developed to help us understand the effects that media have. And this is a quote from McLuhan: "We found that everything man," and you know, it's 1966, so mankind does, everything that people make and do, every procedure, every style, every artifact, every poem, every song, painting, gimmick, gadget, theory, technology, every product of human effort manifested the same 4 dimensions, which is a pretty awesome blanket generalization. Go with it. So here they are. The first one is enhance. Anything that we make has the property of enhancement. What does the artifact enhance or intensify or make possible or accelerate? This can be asked concerning a wastebasket, a painting, a steamroller, or a zipper, as well as about a proposition in Euclid or law or physics, or a law of physics. It can be asked about any word or phrase in any language. Why did people do that? It was to enhance something. Or it has that property. It is an enhancer. At the same time, media have the property of retrieval. What recurrence or retrieval of earlier actions and services is brought into play simultaneously by the new form? What older, previously obsolesced ground is brought back and inheres in the new form? So anything that we're doing new is going to retrieve some other properties of media that are in the rearview mirror that we think are no longer relevant. Third law, obsolescence. If some aspect of a situation is enlarged or enhanced, simultaneously the old condition or unenhanced situation is displaced. What is pushed aside or obsolesced by the new thing? And Shane Hipps really helped me out. His interpretation of obsolescence is not only is it an old condition displaced, but his help to me was, you could also think of that as changes the function. So the car didn't make horses obsolete. Horses didn't go away. It transformed the function of horses to be something else. And then lastly, and this is the part, I think the reason if we pick one of these laws to perseverate about, it's this thing that media do when you push them too far. They reverse into something different than you thought that they were for in the first place. In any medium or structure, there is what Kenneth Boulding calls a break boundary at which the system suddenly changes into another or passes some point of no return in its dynamic process. And being able to apply these 4 laws to media is supposed to help us do it better, not be worked over completely by the medium, by the content while the medium is working this over, to awake from our narcosis. So let's start applying this. So whiteboard. What does whiteboard enhance? And the answers to these are really subjective. Some of these might not work for you, but this is how I've used the 4 laws. This is how I've run the analysis. What does a whiteboard do? It enhances the scope and density of what we can talk about together in real time. If all of the whiteboard markers were burned out in the conference room for the meeting that we were going to have, to me, that's one of the most salient differences in what that meeting would do is we wouldn't be able to talk about as many things or with as much focus as in the presence of it. It enhances that for us. That's why we have these things. What does it retrieve? Some medium that we've had a long time ago that we don't necessarily think is relevant. It's a stick in the dirt. Goes back to the very beginning of figuring, of making shapes and wanting to use shapes as artifacts for interaction with other people. What does it obsolesce? If you've ever been to the art fair here in Ann Arbor, look at what happened to chalkboards. They became knickknacks. We still have them, but a lot of the stuff that we used to use for this purpose of expanding the scope and density of what we can talk about used to be covered off on by chalkboards. Now those are picturesque, cute decor. And this is the part that makes some of my software friends angry. They don't agree. But my belief is that we misuse these. When we misuse them, it's taking a cell phone picture of the whiteboard and there's your documentation. And so for me, when I am using a whiteboard, what I'm trying to do is to lean into what it wants to do and to be mindful of that if we push on it too far, it subverts the utility that we're trying to get out of it. And has anybody here tried to use cell phone pictures of whiteboards for specification Yeah. How'd that work out for us? Is it good?
I mean, it depends. I mean, what you're saying is that the whiteboard is ephemeral in nature, and that's part of what you want. And so taking a picture of it is destroying.
Yep.
However, if you like, utility of ephemeral nature is a different kind of attention. It's a different kind of conversation. And so if you take a picture of something that you do want to keep for later, it's possible it's not what you want, but the whiteboard might want it.
Yeah. Yes. Other reactions to this analysis? Yeah.
So, would you say that there's a difference in the way that it relates to, like, if you take a photo of the whiteboard versus if you write? I mean, there's a difference because those are 2 different mediums as well. But is it that transfers into a different medium, or is it something about the pictorial?
My sense is that when we take the picture of it, it hopped into a different medium and it has different properties. And it reversed into documentation. Ooh, I'm going to play chicken with battery life. Fun. Okay, we'll see if I can make it all the way through. And the cool. This is the part where it's, Marshall, please. Not only do these laws, and they're hard, but he also believes that all media are either cool or hot. And in this instance, he would say that whiteboard, and the reason why turning it into a picture changed it fundamentally is it hopped over into being a hot medium. This is a cool medium. And this is not about what the content means or even what the tool means. This is about the effect of it, which is a hard thing to, I hate this. Here are some examples of the effects of hot media played relative to cool. And this is from, when McLuhan is talking about this, this is 1966 version of this stuff. But the real difference between a cell phone picture of a whiteboard and a whiteboard is the difference between cool and hot. And cool media, he believes, are ones that we have to participate with. We need to get in the picture. I had a picture of a whiteboard, but we need to get into it in order for it to mean. And what that picture does is it extends the single sense in high definition of sight. We miss all the other multisensory stuff that happens around a chalkboard or a whiteboard. It's low in participation. Here's the fucking picture, make the wireframes. It engenders specialization and fragmentation. These parts are UI, these parts are content. Cut up the picture, divide and conquer. According to McLuhan, the hot media detribalize us. They pull us apart. They're exclusionary. They're uniform, mechanical. They extend space. And at the time that he was talking about this stuff, the Vietnam War was going on. And I have a little clip of him talking about hot and cool media in terms of Vietnam, which I think is fascinating. And remember, when he's talking about TV, he's talking about grainy black and white TV from 1967.
You said that bad news was indispensable to newspapers. Is the same thing true for television?
Well, it's like saying if TV is a cool medium, then you can't use it for hot jobs. Like the Vietnam War is a hot war, it won't go on TV. It's the first war ever, a hot shooting war ever shown on cool medium. The cool medium involves the whole audience so deeply, they find war unbearable. Show the same war on movie, on press photography and so on, people won't feel too badly about it. But on TV, they really feel it. They're involved for the first time. And so LBJ is making a great big mistake in trying to have a hot war on a cool medium.
As far as McLuhan is concerned, the low fidelity, grainy picture of the soldiers dying every day that people were treated to on TV. Oh man, is this going to crash? That LBJ was doing it wrong. He should have made a feature film in high resolution showing us winning the war, and that would have given us, we could just watch that and look at him go. Go USA. But our need to complete that grainy picture by imagining what the real picture looks like made it hop into a place where what LBJ was trying to do, as far as McLuhan is concerned, was undermined by medium. So this list is from McLuhan, and this is a categorization of media from 1964. I think television moves over for today because of HD. Television is not a cool medium anymore. Another really controversial thing that he said was Hitler never would have had the effect he had if he was on TV. If he was on a cool medium of grainy TV, we would never have accepted the awful things that were coming out of that man's mouth. It wouldn't have been a mass movement. But the hot medium of the radio that is a laser beam into your skull, that radio is part of the reason why the rise of fascism in the 30s in Europe is because they had this hot medium. You didn't have to participate in it. It was just doing stuff. And yeah, question.
You actually just answered. I was going to ask if you thought a media could change from hot to cool over time based on, I guess, the properties of the media. So then I guess the next question is, do you believe that media, the wants of the media can change over time if its properties and technological foundation will evolve?
Yes. I believe McLuhan believed that that was an active process. This is not a fixed reality. That all media that are cool are on a trajectory to becoming hot. Possibly through that aspect of a reversal, that they become hot and that they're a different thing. It's not satisfactory, I realize. I have a piece of paper here with an article that's smart about McLuhan that I could hand to you that might explain it better. Yes?
If the internet has been coming down, how do you think you would interpret the rise of the new fascist movement today? If Hitler kind of sort of was not.
I think it's the hot medium of the internet. I think it's the high resolution.
You would interpret the internet as hot.
Yeah. And not the internet of my day, back when I was webmaster of Wayne County, making the website for Detroit Metro Airport in Notepad on a Windows 95 computer. That was a cool medium. It was participatory. And we didn't have fucking Nazi, we didn't have that at least I didn't. Not that my experience is representative, but the early advent of the internet did not have these things that we have now. The rise of racists and assholes. Yes?
Are there situations where
I'm not sure. I don't know. Maybe. Let's look for them. Yes.
Like, if you, okay, so the way I understand it, part of the hot medium is, it's. So,
It's hard.
anyway, so like, well, the example I thought was like, when the Library of Congress decided to archive all on Twitter, that would change some of the temperature.
The addition of images in the Twitter timeline completely changed what kind of a medium it was. It used to be text-based. You used to be able to do Twitter on SMS without pictures, and they have heated that thing up because they don't want us participating in it. They want us to just follow it. Yes.
So by that logic, you think most social media is hot?
Yeah, I do. And maybe as an example of hot and cold, here's a little example. Maybe this will help a little bit, make it closer to the kinds of stuff that we make. So low fidelity wireframe. What are these for? What do they enhance? And this is just me. This is how we use them at my company, is to enhance the ability of stakeholders to consider what might be good to do. What does that retrieve? Architects' maquettes, these like loofah sponges on toothpicks for trees and cardboard boxes that approximately shows what the building starts to want to be, but you'd never mistake it for a rendering of the building. That's the sense. And we like that about these. We're using this medium that way on purpose because we like this. We like it that it retrieves that. What it obsolesces in a really strange way is the role of aesthetics in the considering what might be good to do. If we had a higher fidelity wireframe and that line, oh, dear children, it is razor thin. What is the difference between a high and low fidelity wireframe prototype? It's subjective, but it's huge. And the way that we try to use these is to change the function of aesthetics so that you're not choosing based on preferences that you have from other media. Like if we were to show higher fidelity, people are thinking about color, they're thinking about type, they're thinking about kerning, for God's sakes. So we want to change the role of aesthetics. We want you to think about the beauty of the relatedness of the parts of this thing, not the beauty of the surfaces. And what does this reverse into? We have it all the time. Clients want to skip research. When we work through a number of these low fidelity models of what might be good to do, and then we hit pay dirt, someone's like, oh, that one, let's do it, just build it. It becomes, they want to just start building it. And we're like, ew, user research, analysis, analytics, like we want to do a whole bunch of things to build our confidence before we say, yeah, go do this. And if our low fidelity wireframes were too pretty, that's what they're going to want to do, is go build that. And it's so hard because the difference on a client by client basis, on a designer by designer basis, what is the difference between low fidelity wireframe? Oh, and this is cool. How we're using these. We want participation. We want it. We don't want you to, we have kind of an asshole attitude about agencies. We don't call ourselves that. I told my colleague on a call earlier today, hey, we're working with an agency because somebody was lying about when something would be done. That's how you know you're working with an agency, is somebody's lying about when something is going to be done. There's probably an agency involved. Agency presentations, they want to do high fidelity wireframes. This is the mode that I started out in for sure. We want to blow you away with some shit you never could have come up with. We don't want participation. We want sign off. And we want designers to use this to specify how something's going to be built. Already, we're talking about how. That medium, low fidelity one, that's cool. We're talking about what? Whether you could tell the difference between high and medium fidelity, God help you, but there is this razor thin line where it goes from what to how. It goes from a concept that we might consider to, hey, that's awesome, let's do that. And what this retrieves, just like the happy way that we use them, we like to think they retrieve architects' maquettes, these really rough, crude models. These retrieve working drawings. And when this building was